On that mahogany desk, buried under layers of tactical maps, marked with the scars of war, lay a gun. It was not standard government tissue. It was General George S. Patton's signature, a ivory-handled revolver. Under the dim glow of a desk lamp, the weapon gleamed with a cold metallic menace. Sitting across from that desk was not a high-ranking German general nor a surrendering Nazi officer. It was an American sergeant, his face drained of color. The room was deathly quiet save for the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock. Tick-tock. Every second felt like a countdown to the end of a young man's life. General Patton did not scream. Instead, with a voice colder than the winter wind outside, he slowly laid out two options. These choices were about the soul. Late in the autumn of 1940, for the skies over Europe hung low and heavy, a gray shroud promising a coming storm. The Allied offensive was relentless. Yet Nazi Germany, like a wounded beast, was fighting back with desperate, lethal ferocity. In the sector held by the Third Army, the tension was palpable. Inside the Third Army headquarters, the air was thick with the smell of stale tobacco. Staff officers traced red and blue arrows across maps efficiently. But beneath this orchestrated chaos, a dangerous current was flowing. General Patton, a hunter by instinct, smelled something wrong. Reactions were too fast. Every time Patton devised a bold flanking maneuver, the Germans were there waiting. Their anti-tank guns were perfectly positioned, as if they had his playbook. Once is a coincidence, twice is bad luck, but a consistent string of precise counter moves is not an accident of war. Someone was selling the Third Army out. The thought that chilled Patton to the bone was that this traitor was not in Berlin. The rot was here, inside the wire, inside the inner circle of his headquarters. On moonless nights when most of the staff were asleep, Patton became a ghost. He would prowl the corridors of the headquarters, moving with the grace of a predator. Patton, patrolling alone, reached the classified archives section. This was the heart of the Third Army, the repository for every offensive plan and supply route. Yet, at the end of the hallway, from beneath a heavy oak door, a sliver of light escaped. It was faint, but in the pitch-black corridor, it was a beacon. Patton stopped. He did not draw his weapon immediately. Decades of combat experience took over. His breathing became deep and slow. He approached the door, silently peering through the small observation window. What he saw made the blood of the battle-hardened general run cold, then instantly boil. There were no German commandos in the room, no Gestapo agents in trench coats. Standing at the desk, his back to the door, was a man in an American uniform. It was a standard sergeant uniform, worn and washed out, the U.S. Army patch visible in the low light. This was not a stranger. It was a clerk. At this moment, the diligence sergeant was hard at work, but he was not holding a pen. He was holding a miniature camera. His movements were practiced and terrifyingly efficient. He flipped open a file stamped TOP. SEC or ET, adjusted the focus, snapped the shutter, and turned the page. Click, click. To Patton's ears, that soft mechanical sound was louder than a cannon shot. It sounded like a bullet tearing into the hearts of his soldiers. The sergeant was so focused on his task that he never sensed the grim reaper standing behind him. He was photographing the operational blueprints. If those rolls of film left the building, thousands of American G's would walk into a slaughterhouse. Thousands of mothers would receive telegrams. Patton waited no longer. He shoved the door open. The heavy oak slammed against the wall with a thunderous crash. But even that noise was less terrifying than the voice that followed. "What do you think you are doing, soldier?" The voice was not loud. It was not the booming oratory of his speeches. It was sharp, cold, like metal scraping against glass. The sergeant jumped as if struck by lightning. The miniature camera slipped from his sweating hands and shattered on the floor. He spun around, his face instantly draining of blood, turning the color of a corpse. When he saw the man in the doorway, his knees gave way. It was George Patton, the man even the devil checked under his bed for. For a few seconds, silence reigned. Patton stepped into the room and closed the door behind him, sealing them in. He walked toward the desk, each footfall heavy, stepping on the traitor heart. "I asked you a question, Sergeant." Patton's tone remained frighteningly calm. Who authorized you to be in this room at this hour photographing those documents?" The sergeant's lips quivered as he tried to construct a lie. He stammered about overtime, about backing up files, about preventing date, a loss about a superior officer needing copies. But as Patton's hawkish eyes bored into him, the voice faded. The excuses became whispers, then silence. Even the sergeant could not believe his own lies. Patton did not interrupt. He just looked at the broken camera on the floor, then at the map spread across the desk, the assembly area for the 10th Armored Division. The puzzle was solved. The German prescience, the ambushes, the bleeding of his best units. It was not a miracle of the Wehrmacht General Staff. It was this parasite right here. In that moment, Patton felt more than anger. He felt a profound, a searing sense of betrayal. To Patton, the army was a sacred brotherhood. "Guards!" Patton finally roared. The sound shattered the oppressive silence echoing down the hallway outside. The door burst open. Two fully armed MPs rushed in, followed by a few startled senior staff officers. When they took in the scene, the air left the room. The sergeant was secured. The subsequent search was damning. In his locker and quarters, they found undeveloped film German code books and a stash of cash. The investigation revealed this was not a one-time lapse. The sergeant had been on the German payroll for months. Every roll of film was a paycheck. In the days that followed, the 3rd Army headquarters underwent a seismic purge. Security protocols were rewritten. The sergeant sat in a holding cell awaiting court-martial. But before the formal trial, the unexpected happened. Patton ordered the sergeant brought to his private office. This was not an interrogation. The evidence was irrefutable. This was a confrontation of the soul. When the MPs dragged the handcuffed sergeant and they found the room empty of staff. Patton sat alone behind the massive desk. The paperwork was gone. In its place, only the ivory-handled revolver and 2 sheets of paper. Patton signaled the MPs to leave and wait outside. The door clicked shut. The sergeants stood, their head bowed, unable to meet the general gaze. Days of confinement had left him haggard, his eyes wide with terror. "Do you have any idea what you have done, Patton?" asked his voice low, gravelly. The sergeant remained silent, shaking. "I am not talking about the law. I am not talking about regulations." Patton stood up, rounding the desk, moving into the sergeant's personal space. "I am asking if you know how many men of the 90th Infantry Division died at the river crossing because of your information. Do you know how many tanks of the 4th Armored were turned into burning coffins because you gave the Germans the coordinates? Those men were your age. They had mothers. They had wives. They trusted you. They trusted the uniform you are wearing." Every word was a physical blow. The sergeant broke. His legs buckled and he fell to his knees, sobbing. He began to beg. Patton looked down at the weeping man with zero sympathy. For a man like Patton, steeped in the codes of chivalry, an enemy deserved respect. A traitor deserved nothing but spit. Tears at this stage were an insult. Patton walked back to his chair. He picked up the revolver and set it down gently, the barrel pointing to the side. He tapped the 2 papers. "Now we are going to discuss your end," Patton said, his voice returning to that terrifying calm. "You have 2 choices." The sergeant looked up through his tears, a flicker of desperate hope in his eyes. "Option 1, Patton pointed to the first paper. "I call the MPs back in. You go to a court-martial. Your name will be plastered across every newspaper in America. Your crime will be public. Your parents will carry the stain forever. Your family, they will carry the stain of being a traitor kin for the rest of their lives. Every person you have ever known will know you for the filth you are. You will die at the end of a rope or by a firing squad, but your shame will live forever." The sergeant's face turned gray. In 1940, for family honor was everything. To destroy his parents' name was a fate worse than death. Or Patton paused, his eyes drifting to the ivory-handled gun. Option 2. The atmosphere in the room grew heavy, suffocating. Patton's voice dropped to a whisper laced with a dark temptation. "You pick up this weapon. You walk into that private bathroom over there. There is one round in the chamber. You solve this yourself. I will file the report as an accidental discharge due to combat fatigue. Your family will receive a telegram stating you died in the line of duty. They will get the pension. They will think you were a hero. Your shame will die in this room with you. No one will know you were a traitor, except me and God. It was a brutal test. Patton was offering the traitor a way out, a chance to buy back a shred of dignity with his life, a chance to shield his family. The sergeant stared at the gun. It was the end of life, but the end of shame. His hand trembled as he slowly reached out. Sweat dripped from his forehead onto the polished desk. He was warring with himself. Death was terrifying, but living as the most hated man. Living as the most hated man in America was worse. His fingertips were inches from the cold steel. The room held its breath. And then, in a blur of motion, a hand slammed down over the gun. It was Patton. He pulled the weapon away. The sergeant looked up, confused, paralyzed. Patton stared at him, the coldness in his eyes replaced by pure, unadulterated disgust. "Actually, I have changed my mind," Patton said, holstering the weapon with a sharp snap. His voice dripped with contempt. "You do not deserve it." "You do not deserve it," the sergeant whispered. He looked at the holster, then at Patton Faison, able to comprehend the sudden reversal. "No, you do not," Patton thundered. "You do not deserve the honorable way out. You do not deserve to die like a hero in this office. You do not deserve to have your family live on a pension paid for by the blood of the brothers you betrayed. That is stolen valor. That is not fair to the men you killed. That is not fair to the real heroes." Patton slammed his hand on the buzzer on his desk. The door flew open and the MPS marched in. "Get him out of my sight," Patton pointed a finger at the heap of a man on the floor. "Take him to court-martial. Let him face judgment. Let him live every day feeling the weight of his shame crushing his spirit. Let him rot in Leavenworth, knowing that the whole world knows what he is. That is the punishment you earned, not a quick exit." The sergeant was dragged out limp as a rag doll. He had lost his last chance to act like a man because his cowardice would not allow it. The incident sent shockwaves through the command. Some questioned if Patton had gone too far, dangling suicide before a prisoner. But for Patton, this was not just about catching a spy, it was a message. In the Third Army, loyalty was the religion, betrayal the sin. German intelligence soon went dark in that sector. Their source code named Lucky was gone. But what terrified the German High Command more? They realized they were not fighting a tactician, they were fighting a force of nature with a primal sense of justice. The sergeant faded into history, serving a long sentence, living a life defined by disgrace. But Patton marched on across Europe like an iron wave. Because in war, the deadliest bullet is not the one fired from the front lines. It is the one fired from behind. And the only armor against that bullet is loyalty, absolute and unbreakable. This story of General Patton and the traitor is a brutal reminder that the most dangerous enemies are often the ones we trust the most. If you want more uncovered history from the archives of World War, to make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. I am your strategy observer.